Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the MindCep Podcast. This is your host, Alex Muir, and in today's episode, episode 24, we're going to be speaking with our special guest, Daniel Goodenough. Daniel is a life coach, author, and speaker, and is the author of the fictional book, The Caravan of Remembering. And please welcome Daniel Goodenough to the podcast. And this episode is brought to you by RadioGuestList.com, the #1 free radio guest, podcast, and talk show guest expert interview booking service on the internet. And I'm really looking forward to having you on and kind of what you have to say, because I was doing a little bit more reading on you, and you got a very spiritual background, and your background as a life coach, for more than 30 years. And your company, the way to the heart. You did that for a very long time, and I'm just really looking forward to kind of what you have to say about helping people find their life mission, or helping people find their true passion.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and a couple of questions I really wanted to ask you. When I was doing some research on you, is like a little bit about your book, because you're the author of The Caravan of Remembering. And you wrote that, and then your life coach experience. So tell me a little bit about, because it's a fictional book, and tell me a little bit about like the book itself and how it can help people, with discovering their passion.
Sure. Well, the subtitle of the book is A Roadmap for Experiencing the Awakening of Your Life Mission. And the book came out of doing the in-person weekends of helping people remember why they're here and what that calls them to do and who that calls them to be. So I've been doing that for about 30 some years, and I wanted to make the process. And what I mean by that is my idea around life mission is that it's not just for the lucky few. It's something that anyone and everyone can remember. It's a skill like anything else in life. And if you're willing to do the practice, you can absolutely identify why you're here, what that calls you to do, and who that calls you to be, and how to dance with our rapidly changing times in the way that an average high school graduate now may need to have as many as 15 or 16 careers over their lifetime.
Holy moly.
Yeah. So what do you use to base the reinvention of self over and over? And so that's my approach to life mission. And to be clear, I make the distinction of vision, because they get collapsed a lot. Vision is, at least in the way that I think about it, is what you see as possible for the world that other people might also be doing. And the life mission would be the unique way that you as an individual would approach that. And the purpose, that the idea of purpose, which often gets collapsed with life mission, I see as being more temporary. Like I think it was Eckhart Tolle said that sometimes our purpose is to get to the other side of the room, and sometimes our purpose is to finish our work so we can get home early, or sometimes our purpose is to finish our work so we have the weekend, or any number of things like that. So and I also have found that when people think about their life purpose, that it tends to go in trends, like fashion trends, that
right.
In one decade, it's trendy to say my life purpose is this, and then the next decade, it's trendy to say my life mission is this, and so on. So anyway, the life mission being the very unique, personal way you approach the vision of possibility. And the first level of that in the work I do is the why am I here? What does that call you to do? And who does that call you to be? And that weekend process is embedded in the book, The Caravan of Remembering, so that anyone could do the process at any time by themselves using the book. And the characters in the book work through the process. So you have that as an example. And I have these things I call scales, which is the inquiry. If you're a master musician and you want to become an elite musician, there are scales you do every day to become highly skillful at the instrument. In this case, the instrument is you. And if you were an elite athlete, there'd be practices to do. So what I call scales, the inquiry, the questions and the exercises that if you did every day would allow you to be masterful at using the instrument called you in your life to embody your reason for being here. And so that's a character embedded in a story. I lived and worked in Chicago. I had a design studio in Chicago for a number of years, and I used that as an inspiration. So the main character in the book starts off as a founder of a design studio and is working the process both in his life, his daily life in Chicago, and then going to this place called the Caravan of Remembering, which you could think of as a dream, a place you go to in your dreams, or a place you go to you're in your thoughts or between your thoughts. It's a virtual place where everyone is in the Caravan of Remembering to work on the question and the inquiry. Why am I in the horizontal world, which you'd say that caravans in the vertical world, and we live in the horizontal world, hopefully vertically. And he goes back and forth between the caravan and his life in Chicago and works the process for getting clear, gets help in the caravan. And I could share some of those exercises, but that's the start. That's where the Caravan of Remembering came from.
Wow, that's incredible. And I feel like it's totally up my alley right now because it's exactly what I feel like I need to kind of like reset, like to help. I always like to read certain books or certain articles or listen to certain people to help me realign my vision. Just make sure that I have that, have that clarity of exactly what I want to do. Because I know I've always known exactly what I want to do, but I don't know exactly how to get it. So I utilize, listening to podcasts, audiobooks, reading lots of different books. I feel I need that zest of variety to help formulate my decisions and to help use those things as a guide. So I feel like, I want to read your book to help use that because I'm always open to other ways of, different processes to become the best version of myself.
Yeah, that reset, that's the word of the day, isn't it? With COVID shutting everything down, and the popular phrase is we are collectively in a reset. And that's been the trend even before COVID, that, as I mentioned earlier, the average high school graduating senior might need to reset, reevaluate, reinvent self 15 or 16 times. And over their lifetime, and even within a single career, the rapidly changing world we live in means that the conversation you're in, your life mission, your why, what, and who in a conversation with life is constantly needing to shift and dance and adapt. And the importance then of being skillful in the conversation. I think it was David White that said, all of your ability to hold the conversations you were made for rely entirely on your ability to hold radical attention to your intention. And without that radical intention, nothing much happens at the frontier of your being. So the intention then to live your reason for being here artfully, beautifully, sacredly, and skillfully. That's the other piece, is that once you're clear about the why am I here, what does that call me to do, and who does that call me to be, then there's the manner in which you go about how you do that. And that would be the integration of art, science, and spirit, or the good, the true, and the beautiful, or living your life mission artfully, beautifully, sacredly, and skillfully. So doing the skills helps you be present to it and articulate it skillfully, and also adapt and reinvent and co-create with life skillfully the manner in which you manifest your why. So
No, that's incredible. And do you feel, through your teachings and what you've learned up until this point, that you've taught not only your students but yourself how to manifest the life that you want?
yeah, well, you mentioned earlier that you already knew what your life mission was.
Hmm.
And then it was, okay, how do I do that? And I could say that this thing that I've been doing, helping people remember why they're here and to do it skillfully and to manifest and adapt and recreate and reinvent and co-create with life, um, as when I was young, this work, the personal growth movement, that we're engaged in, the personal development, personal growth industry wasn't really a thing yet. There was 100 years ago, there were people like Napoleon Hill and William
Mm-hmm.
Clement Stone writing books, but that wasn't really in the general culture. If you were lucky, you might encounter it, but that wasn't in the general. So there I am, and I remember. I don't really remember at what point that you're aware of self, but I know I do have a distinct memory of being 3 years old and knowing why I was here, and of course I articulate that much better now. But then moving through grade school and into high school, saying, okay, this is what I want to do isn't in the job catalog anywhere. And they did have those, and I don't know if they still do. It's probably on the internet now. It was a big book in the guidance counselor's office, and there was nothing like what I do in a job catalog. So over the decades, it's been the invention of, here's why I'm here. This is what I'm called to do. I have a little bit of an idea of who I'd have to be to do that, but that's been an evolving, growing thing. So the lifelong pursuit then is, yes, to say, how do I help other people remember, and how do I reach them when I do know how to do that? And so that was, I remember being 14 and saying, well, okay, how do I become famous so that people will listen to me when I talk about life mission? Which was, logic of a 14-year-old. How do I become famous so people will listen to me? Too small for sports and too shy for acting. And I'm pretty good at music. So I decided music was the angle. And I did that for a while. I do have a fine arts degree. I worked as a scientist for a while. I did and then I started the design studio because I read Paul Pilsner's book about, at that time, he said 90% of the jobs people will be doing in 10 years don't exist yet. So you'll have to invent them yourself, which is what I was doing. And also there was that piece about needing to be self-employed by and large, and that being the trend. So I thought, what business could I start that wouldn't drive me nuts? And I was doing session work with a drummer at the time, and he was also a preeminent hand letterer and designer. And so I took my fine arts degree and hung out with him at night. I was working in the music business during the day, and would go to his house and apprentice as a designer and an illustrator and a hand letterer at night. And then we opened the studio together. And that was really not because it was my life mission. It was really for the sole purpose of having the experience of starting a business for myself, self-employed. So really, it's been a lifelong research project up until the point that I started doing it full time, and then the research project is refining the process. And so the life mission 1 level is the why, what, and 2, and life mission 2 is then how do you do that when you're clear about the why, what, and who on an individual basis. And the 3rd level of that is the manner in which you do it, the integration of art, science, and spirit. So you do it artfully, beautifully, sacredly, and skillfully. And then the 4th level is how do you scale that up in the world? How do you form core teams, and how do you scale that up in a way that up and across your community, or up and across your state or province or your country or the globe? And that work I've currently, for the last 3 years, been bringing into corporate and entrepreneurial work to help people scale up their companies and their entrepreneurial projects. Within the context of their life mission, the individuals who work for them, their life mission. So the personal mission and the corporate mission, in a way that's co-creating that with life.
Right. Because it's all about finding that balance. And that's the thing that I'm always super obsessed about is like, okay, when I see these like super successful people, how do they integrate their business, their life mission with their wife or their relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And especially if they have a family, they have kids, how does that all gel together? Because the one common denominator that I see a lot of the times with successful people that I can't relate to is like their relationship tends to suffer first. And I'm big on my relationship. That's like my numero uno. Like my career is extremely important, but at the same time, like I feel like I wouldn't be able to get to the level I'm at now without my girlfriend, because she's going to be my future wife, and without her, I just, you see things a little differently when it's just you, right? It's like, or if you're, even if you have a business partner or something like that, but it's a different dynamic. I feel like you reach a whole
Sure.
nother level when you have that loved one with you that's standing
Well,
by your side and supporting you.
well, that brings up a point that I'd also make about life mission, that when people have discussions about purpose and mission and vision, that often gets collapsed into it being all about career. And I would say that you have a family life mission and a partner life mission, marriage or life partner life mission. You have a community life mission. You have a spiritual
Hmm.
life mission. That you have life mission is your whole life, not just your career. And each of those aspects of life have a why, what, and who. That each of those aspects as a level of who you called to show up as in your
Yeah.
marriage, with your partner, in your community, with your colleagues at work, and so on. And then who do you show up as in however you think about spirituality, whatever that means to you, and the what that calls you to do, and how that aligns with why you're here. It's a whole life thing. It's not just a career. So that's an important point. And then if you're really clear about that and you're engaged in the inquiry consistently, like a practice you would do if you were a musician or an athlete or anyone else needing to be skillful, a visual or performing artist, for instance, then you would be present to all of those aspects of life mission, because what you're wanting to do the inquiry to be skillful in is the manifestation and the embodiment of your reason for being here. And that means your reason for being with the partner you are and having the family you have, and how you're meant to be with and serve the community you're in, and the globe, hopefully, and your country, and however you think about your spirituality, to be in service in that way. And so all of that's part of the question of why am I here? What does that call me to do? And who does that call me to be today and tomorrow? And how that's going to change over the next little bit.
No, for sure. And another thing I find super interesting is how yourself, like very dynamic. You're a musician, you're a designer, life coach, like so many different areas with so many different skill sets, and then you've integrated them all together. And that's what I find super interesting too, is how, you got people that are absolute specialists. They've just done one thing and they want to just master that one area. Like, if they're in construction, or they're just a musician, or they're just um, a singer, or, anything like that. And then you've got other people that have done like mini careers in a lot of different areas. Like I've had people on my podcast that have gone from musician to financial planner to fireman. It's just so interesting how everyone's so different, and everyone they just, yeah, like you said, it's a constantly evolving thing, like your life mission, and it changes sometimes really quickly.
Well, here's what I would say about that. Barbara Shear had an interesting way to talk about that phenomenon. She referred to what she called divers and scanners. So there are those people who do one thing for their entire life, and she would call them divers. And then
Hmm.
the people who move from thing to thing to thing, she would call scanners. And she would say there are serial scanners, the one who go deeply into something for 3 or 5 years, and then go deeply into something else for 3 to 5 years. And
Right,
then there are the scanners that do multiple things all at the same time.
right,
What I would say in terms of life mission, the thing about that is that I would say you do in fact only have one life mission. What changes is the vehicle of expressing that life mission.
right.
So that if you're a scanner and you're doing multiple things all at the same time, when you do the inquiry, what you want to get in touch with is what's the thread that ties the pearls together? What's the life mission that you express in this way when you're using this vehicle, and you express in this way when you're using this vehicle, and so on? But you're still clear on what's the thread that ties those together. What's the one life mission and the multiple expressions? And in the reinvention of self, 15 or 16 or 20 times over your lifetime, or the reinvention of self even within a certain career, if you're clear about that fundamental ground of being why, And then as you're called to reinvent the vehicles or move from vehicle to vehicle or do several vehicles simultaneously, then you're clear about what's the fundamental that you're applying to each of these things that remains the same. That you could say when you looked at life when you were 5 and when you looked at life when you were 15 and 25 and 35 and so on, the both end of that is you're a very different person and you're also the same exact person. And both of those are true. There's a part of us that doesn't change. And there's a part of us that hopefully does and evolves and grows and changes.
Mm.
And life mission is like that. There's a thread, there's a why you're here that was, you call it a pre-existing agreement. It's the why and it does not change. What changes is the manner in which you express it or the vehicles you express it. It's likely that who you express it with changes to a fair degree, but the mission, it doesn't. So then the inquiry is to get really clear about what that fundamental thread is so that when you're reinventing self, when you're doing the reset, when you're collaborating with other people, so you can find your kindred spirits or your company of players.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the movie Shakespeare in Love, it's one of the life mission scales. In the movie Shakespeare in Love, Viola says, I would spend my whole life dreaming if I could spend it in the company of players. And in her case, the company of players was a company of actors. But for any of us, our company of players would be our kindred spirit colleagues and the people that we collaborate with. And finding your company of players. And incidentally, that was one of the gifts in Napoleon Hill's work. And people in that area were talking about mastermind groups. And that was a common thread in when Napoleon Hill was introduced to the 500 richest, most powerful people in the world at that time, a little over 100 years ago, by Andrew Carnegie. He found that, there were 17 principles that were true for every one of those people. And one of them was that every one of them had a mastermind group. And many of them had an inner mastermind group that was made up of people that were real and fictional. They had just this imaginary inner mastermind group they would work with. And so that's the company of players is one of those scales you can do to say, I'm like, who's my outer mastermind group and who's my inner mastermind group? And then when you pick who you pick to be in your mastermind group, will tell you something about your life mission. So it'll be a clue. It won't be an accident that you would pick the people you would pick. And even if you say entirely out there in the world people, if you got to pick anyone at all for your mastermind group to meet with once a week or to call up when you have a question, who you would pick will have a lot to say about either what your life mission is or how you're being called to manifest it now or the vehicle you're called to use now. And we could talk about some other scales if you'd like. And if you have another question, we could do that.
Yeah, no, this is really good. And one thing I also wanted to say was you remind me so much of the author Eckhart Tolle and also John Gray, the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, based on your background and your expertise. And because I saw John Gray at a live event with Tony Robbins back in, would have been like 2018. Yeah, in the summer. Yeah, 2018 or 2019 in August. He had an event in Vancouver because I'm from Canada. And so me and my friend went to that. We saw Tony Robbins, we saw John Gray, Jen Sincero, and then Phil Town. And so he the way Tony Robbins does his events, when you go to his event and is like he'll bring out, or he always brings out some of his his mentors or advisors or people that he's close with, fellow authors or speakers and stuff like that. So that got gets everyone really going, and he has them amp us up, and then he's always the last to come out, of course, right? And that's when he gets his music going and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, totally like the way you speak and talk and your background is totally like John Gray and Eckhart Tolle. Just that spiritual side, right? And I'm a really spiritual person myself, I would say. And one thing that I found that has really helped me over the years, because I got a background in finance and banking, was the meditation. Starting to do meditation. And do you currently do meditation or some form of it?
Yes, I am. I'm how would I describe spiritual mud, I guess.
Spiritual mud? Yeah.
Mutt.
Oh,
Spiritual.
mutt. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I'm a Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Sufi, Native, First Nation, et cetera person. I've studied pretty much all the traditions and been fortunate to work with great teachers in each of those traditions. So um, I'm very blessed in that way to have had great teachers in each of those traditions. And so I have multiple practices. One of the, my Sufi lineage with Hazrat Naik Khan, he was known as a universalist, and in his Sufi tradition, they would do practices from every one of the spiritual traditions, and still do, for that matter. His grandson now is continuing that work. So yes, very much. I do multiple practices.
Yeah, and I saw on your website there, The Way to Your Heart, it says Sufis have a saying that any time one person honors their purpose for being here, 10,000 more will find their way. So that statement is kind of is a really big part of my life is of what my life mission is. Because basically all I'm trying to do over these last few years, I've been trying to find my medium or my platform, like you were saying, to share my message with the world of the way I see how I can be of service and help people to the greatest extent possible. And what I've come to the realization was I'm loving connecting with fellow podcasters or authors on my podcast, having different guests on because it's helping me help other people my age and younger. Because I feel like like you were saying, because a lot of us in the younger generation are just coming out of high school, that we are having to reinvent ourselves multiple times over, and we're used to having to adapt really quickly, and things are changing every 5 minutes. As fun and exciting as that can be, at the same time, it can be very challenging. So my way of helping others and people my age or younger, or even a little bit older, is just kind of give them um, a different way of seeing things and having multiple perspectives to help them be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, like I totally relate to this guy. Like, he's has all these different, experts on and people in different backgrounds, and then they can, it'll help them find their way. Because I feel like the hardest part when you're a young person is knowing where you want to go, or having, you might not have the parents supporting you, or you might not have the friends supporting you, but I feel like having someone on a podcast that's talking about like you can do it, you can find your way is so empowering, especially for young people.
Well, let's give them some practices to do. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Yeah.
So then again, I refer to them as scales, something you could do regularly. And so I might start with, and I sometimes start with early childhood things. And then for some people, if we had childhoods they'd rather forget, we could just say, okay, we'll ask the same questions for now. So you could say, what were your favorite stories as a child? Or what are your favorite stories now? When you were young, what were your favorite toys? What were your favorite movies? What were your favorite books? What were the favorite places to go? What were your favorite activities? And I'm kind of rattling these off because they can listen to the podcast several times and get these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what were your favorite events, your favorite sports, your favorite challenges, your favorite cultures? Who were your heroes? And it's one thing to list those things out, and that can be helpful. These were my favorite movies and books and places and activities and events and things like that. And that can be helpful. What's the most helpful, though, is to ask yourself why.
Mm-hmm.
Why were they your favorite stories, movies, books, places, activities? What was it about them that had them be your favorites? And that could be for then, and you could ask the same question for most of those things for now, because we have this phrase about adult toys, like people in their cars and their tech stuff and their TVs are kind of adult toys. But
Yeah.
Whatever your favorites are, and then that same goes to what you would call your best days. Why would you call them your best days? What makes them your best days? And then some other scales would be like, if you could spend the day with anyone at all, real or fictional, from any time in history, who would you want to spend the day with and why? And what would you ask that person? And what would you want to do with that person? And another one scale might be, what's the question at the center of your life? And said that Gautama Buddha wasn't looking to wake up. He was in the search for the answer to a set of questions like, why do we grow old? Why do we die? And why do we get sick? And being all in on those three questions woke him up. He became, the word Buddha means awake. He became awake because he was all in on those three questions. So you could ask yourself, what's the question at the center of your life? And another way to put that is, what's the question your life is meant to be the answer to? And then, some of you may or may not remember the original TED stage. Originally, there was only one TED stage. And it was a big deal if you got to speak on that stage and you had 18 minutes. And you were pretty much guaranteed, if you got that 18 minutes, that at least 100 million people around the globe would listen to you. So you could imagine if you had your 18 minutes on that original TED stage and you knew that at least 100 million people all around the world was going to hear what you had to say, what would you have to say? How would you use your 18 minutes? And Rumi said, let the beauty you love be what you do. And if you let the beauty you love be what you do, what would you be doing? And, there's the kind of cliche question, if you only had a year to live, what would you do with it? You might add, if you knew you would absolutely positively live for 300 years in a healthy manner and your mind would be intact and you'd be fully functional, what would you do with your 300 years? And when do you feel the most alive? And when do you feel the most engaged? And when do you feel the most confident? And when do you feel the most motivated? What ignites you? What wakes you? What, instead of making you afraid, wakes you up? I don't know.
Right.
I think it was Adulent or one of those movies where the character, one of the characters said to the other character, that scares most people, but instead it wakes you up. So what wakes you up? Where other people become afraid, for you, it wakes you up. What connects you? So those would be, I have many, many more questions, but those would be examples, including being clear about what's absolutely not your life mission. Sometimes it's as helpful to know what's not your life mission as a place to start. So those are some examples of asking those questions every day, like even just the big three. Why am I here? What does that call me to do? And that's the outer life mission. And who does that call me to be? That's the inner life mission. And then the what you do changes who you are. And because who you are changed with what you did, that means what you're going to do will change. So what you do changes who you are, which changes what you do, which changes who you are, which changes what you do. So that's that conversation between the inner and the outer life mission. And doing these scales helps you do that in a way that has you in an ongoing way ever present to that why, what, and who. And just those three questions alone, if you just ask that every morning. Why? What's the why in my relationship? What's the why in my family? What's the why in my work? What's the why with my friends and colleagues? What's the why in my conversation with the one that sent me? However you think about that. And given that why, what does that call me to do today? In the next hour, what does that call me to do? And who would I have to be to really show up to this? And if I really show up to this, who am I going to become? And if I don't show up to this, who am I going to become? And so it's really the idea about questions is the power is in the question, not the answer. And so that's another thing, is what kind of questions are you asking yourself? Because you form your life based on your questions. So are you asking empowering questions?
Right. Yeah. And that's another thing too. Like, I definitely ask a lot of empowering questions, but then I go through periods where I ask kind of questions like, why am I not understanding this? Or why am I not, why is this feeling like, am I feeling, this tension or stuff like that? So
why does this always happen to me? Those kind of questions.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily. Yeah. It is along those lines, but yeah, for sure.
That's the ones that people often ask. The other one thing you can be sure of, if you're procrastinating, you right before you started procrastinating, you asked yourself a series of disempowering questions.
Right. Right.
And they
Yeah.
usually come in packets like that. You almost never just ask yourself one disempowering question. They usually come in packets. It's kind of like how our mind works.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like you've got this list before you're about to procrastinate. It's like, if I put this off, how will I feel? If I put this off, you
Well,
know,
the
stuff
idea
like
that
that.
you're going to put it off came from because you were already asking yourself disempowering questions.
Right.
But, and the flip side of that, to focus on the toward, is to say, then why am I here? What does that call me to do? And who's that call me to be? And what's the question at the center of my life? And um, if I let the beauty of love be what I do, if the beauty I love is what I did and am doing, what would that be? And what do I do for the love of the game, and what connects me to the one that sent me? And what are the ingredients? And what are speaking of that, what are the conversations I was made for? And there's this thing in the wisdom book, Proverbs, says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's older, he will not depart from it, which is a really poor translation of what was actually in the book of Proverbs. A more accurate translation is create an environment for life according to your child's gift or bent, and he or she will not depart from it when they're older. So, and what would it mean then to create an environment for life? As a parent, that translation versus the other one. The other translation says, as a parent, you're supposed to tell your kids what to do, and they should listen to you, and tell them that they should do it early enough so that that when they're older, you've already got that in early.
Hmm.
And the other translation says, it's not so much as a parent you're supposed to tell them what to do. You create an environment for life in which they discover it for themselves according to their gift and bent. So you find them the people in your community who understand them and will help them step into who they were meant to be. So you can do that for yourself. It's never too late. You can parent yourself in that way and say, all right, so what would it mean to create an environment for life for myself according to my gift or bent? So what's my gift or bent? So it's this ongoing idea of asking yourself these questions, doing the inquiry. And in the spiritual traditions, I think it was Adyashanti that would said, that the two wings of waking up are inquiry and practice. So the meditation and the centering and the presencing practices, that you mentioned earlier with the inquiry are the two wings of waking up. And in certain traditions, there's the possibility of waking up through your work in the world. So, and that's the Bhagavad Gita was an ancient Vedic text that had to do with waking up through the work you do in the world by being present in the work you do in the world, and saying, what does this work I'm doing have to do with my agreement for being here? Along the lines of Rumi's quote, where Rumi said, it's as if you were sent by a king to a foreign land and you did 10,000 things, but not the one thing. It's as if you've done nothing, which I think is a little harsh.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's as if you've done nothing, and I think we get more than one chance. But the main point, though, is, if you're an employee and you send or an employer and you send your employee off to do an errand, and they do 25 things, but not the one thing you sent them to do, when they come back with whatever it is they come back with, you're like, okay, so what happened to the thing I sent you to do? Like, what's up with that? And you're not going to be totally pleased. So it's not a direct analogy, but it is as if, however you think of the one that sent you, there's an agreement for your why, what, and who, and to do, 1,000 other things or 10,000 other things, and 10,000 things in Zen is code for the multiplicity of life, and not in a good way necessarily. So to do the 10,000 things, but not the one thing. So the idea is to be in the inquiry, to make your life the embodiment of your why and your agreement with the one that sent you, so that the why, your work in the world, and I mean that in a good way, because the work you were meant to do with your partner and your family and your community and your career too, and your relationship with the one that sent you, that all of that becomes part of the practice of waking up and embodying and growing and evolving.
Yeah, no, it's like it's so incredible. To have that, to like ask those powerful questions, and that's something I listen to a lot of Tim Ferriss's podcasts and
Mm-hmm.
his and I love his books, and that's a big thing that he says. He's like, if you want to realign or redirect your life's mission, sometimes all you have to do is ask better questions. Learn how to ask better questions and more empowering questions that'll put you in a position to ask those questions to the people that you want to ask those questions to, because that's a big part of being where we are as of right now, is like where we got to this point for a reason, and we asked certain
Mm-hmm.
questions to get us to this point, like you said. But to get to the next level, or to get past that hurdle, to get to that other level where we want to get to, we got to ask better, more thoughtful questions.
Well, and it's good to remember that the questions are a kind of search image.
Right.
So if the kind of questions you're asking is how am I successful in business? And let's say you're even asking empowering and skillful questions, what that does is help you become successful in business. That may or may not have anything to do with why you're here.
Right.
And
Right.
there are, I've worked with billionaires who climbed to the top of the ladder. And I think it was Stephen Covey said, sometimes you find that you've climbed to the top of the ladder only to discover the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall.
Right. Right.
So I've talked to billionaires who became billionaires, climbed to the top of the ladder, and when we started this conversation, they would reach a point and they go, "Oh," and that all was all of these things I'm doing had nothing to do with why I'm here.
Right.
And I
Right.
guess if you have $1 billion at that point, it's helpful to make that shift. But why not make it part of what you do? So it's not just asking empowering questions. If you want it to have the kind of meaning that your deepest self wants it to have, it's not just empowering questions or even good questions. You would want to include in that series of questions something that has to do with why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
And what
Mm-hmm.
does that call you to do? And who does that call you to be? Because, the who is the inner life mission. And that's the only thing you're going to take with you, no matter how many toys you accumulate and how many properties or how many anything, and I'm not against any of those things. They're all good. I'm just saying that the only thing you're going to take with you, though, is what's changed inside you. The inner life mission is the only thing you'll take with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like that classic movie, You Can't Take It With You.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
um, so it's worth, yes, asking empowering questions. Include in those questions the questions that have to do with why you should care about any of that anyway. I think it was Ken Wilber who said, whose definition of spirituality is, or he said at one point, his definition of spirituality was the questions of ultimate concern. So if you're ultimately concerned in this moment, how do I become successful at business? That's fine. But that may not have be the question ultimately that's of ultimate concern for your life. And there are no guarantees, especially in our day. As COVID points out, that there are a lot of people who are healthy and thriving and thought they had another 50 years or 70 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not here anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no guarantee. So if you think I'll become successful first, and then I'll ask the question about why I'm here, it might be better not to wait. Why not do them both at the same time? And incidentally, there was a graduating class from Harvard Business School, MBA, Harvard Business class. And they asked them upon graduation, are you going for the money first or are you going for the meaning? And
Uh,
then 20 years later, they checked back in with them. And only one person had achieved all their goals by going for success and money first. All the rest of the ones who had achieved the money they wanted and the marriage they wanted and the career they wanted and all the things that they actually wanted that made life meaningful to them, all of them, and including the big money, all but one of those people went for the money first. Or I mean, the opposite, went for the meaning first. They
right.
went for so the meaning first and the money came later. Only one person out of that entire graduating class went for the money and got it.
Wow.
Everyone else went for the meaning first and got all the other things. So
Wow.
when you're asking those questions, I highly recommend you ask the kind of questions that would bring you to the why.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you may find you got to the top of the ladder and was leaning against the wrong wall.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And that's one thing I really want to avoid. And because I know I'm aware of it, when I'm like, oh, yeah, no, don't focus on the money too much. Focus on why am I doing this? Why do I want it? And the like a couple questions, another couple set of questions that I ask myself is, does this activity provide me energy? Does it give me energy, or does it take away energy?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm starting to notice the activities that drain my energy or the people that drain my energy. I will take a step back and reevaluate and be okay, I'm not getting energy from this activity or this social interaction. I'm actually losing energy. So I'm trying to realign that energy to where it gives me energy.
So here's a piece to add to that. So I get what you mean, and something that's deeply meaningful to us can give us energy. The thing to be present to also, though, is that in our age, we have a lot of people who are addicted to adrenaline.
Yeah, true.
And what gives them energy is conflict. What gives them energy is high risk. What gives them, and there are things that can give you energy in the form of adrenaline that again have absolutely nothing to do with why you're here. It's all about what's the high risk game I can play. What's the big payoff I can go for. What's the like, why is it that people watch sports for hours and hours and get all excited and energized around the sports team? If sports is your life mission, and I know it is for some people, that's great. But if you're going to say what gives me energy and that's some kind of an indicator, then you want to be present to why that's giving you energy. In the same way that I said, what was your favorite movies, books, places, activities, events? I could say, what are your favorite challenges? You could get a lot of energy by a series of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And those challenges may have absolutely nothing to do with why you're here. So the bottom line for all of those questions is why. Mm-hmm. If you say to yourself, what gives me energy? What takes energy and what gives me energy? What wakes me up and what puts me to sleep? There are things that would put you to sleep, not because they don't have anything to do with your life mission, because they make you afraid and you haven't checked out what to do with your fear. So I would say you want to be clear when you ask that question, what gives me energy, to follow that up immediately with why, because it could be all about the adrenaline or fear. Either way, a fear gives you adrenaline, and there's a going for it adrenaline as well. It's like some people argue all the time, not because there was anything to argue about, because that's how they get their adrenaline fix.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I definitely feel like a lot of people are adrenaline seeking for sure. That's like the term that you say to some of your friends that are super into skydiving and surfing and all those high risk activities. I always joke to them and I say, because that's just not my thing. I don't like putting myself in like a position where there's a possibility I could get seriously injured or hurt or even die. Yeah. I tell my friends, I'm like, ooh, that person's an adrenaline junkie and that's not me. But like you said, we do seek adrenaline out or high energy activities in different ways for sure.
Yeah. Well, so it is a good question to ask, what gives me energy and life force? Just right after you answer that, say, so why is that? And not just so that you're clear that it's energy, you get energy for the right reason. It gives you a clue about how your life mission was wired in. Like, what's the context and what's the principles and what are the maps that create the underlying foundation and the platform for why that gives you energy, which will then tell you more about the why of your life mission. So that when you're resetting, as we've talked about, it's not just, well, I used to get my energy doing that, but now what? But let's say that went, and like a lot of things, that just went away when COVID started.
Right.
So now what do I do? If you can say, well, why did that give me energy? What was it about that? How did that correlate with the way I'm wired? How did that correlate with what when I feel confident and when I feel alive and why I'm motivated and what my sense of being in service is, and how did it relate to those things? And when you get clear about that, then yes, it gives you energy, and you also know how to apply that to other things, and then you may get that and even a greater um, life force,
Mm-hmm.
the ground of being life force. Because now that you have that, you can apply it to anything, and you can find a way to get that life force by showing up in the who and the why and the what that gives the context in the search image for, because there's a lot of things, I think it was Eckhart Tolle that said, the power of now, first of all, wasn't the clock now, it was the epiphany now. The word epiphany means that eternity has entered into time. So it's the long now, the inspired now, the in the zone now. And
Right, right.
he would say that no one is in that place all the time. So he'd say that there's three, and he said there were three ways of looking at it, and I kind of like it. And that on the one place, you are in that place. You're totally in the zone. You're totally in. You're dropped in. You're clicked in. You're in this place, and that's great. There are times like the amount of traveling I did before COVID. I found myself in the security line at the airport a lot, and I wouldn't say that's exactly my happy place to be waiting in line in security to go through the scanner. On the other hand, what you can do is be in acceptance. Okay, this is part of the drill. If you travel, you have to accept that this is part of the drill. And so while I'm not in my happy place, I'm not in my unhappy place. I'm just in acceptance, right? So
Right.
the three modes is you're clicked in and you're in the zone, or you're in acceptance. And the other one is what he called enthusiasm, and I would call that inspiration or epiphany or insight. That inspiration means in spirito, spirit has entered in, or eternity is epiphany, eternity has entered into time, or in theos, that that inspiration, which is the future calling you, being called by the future. So between those three states, we we can be in acceptance about the times we're not exactly thrilled, and there are the times when we're thrilled, and there's the times when we're being called by the future, and that's inspiration. And that's all very different than adrenaline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I totally like, and the way you articulated that was really awesome. Like, because I never knew how to put it into words like that. Because me and my girlfriend, we love to travel, but like you said, sometimes you get some really early mornings to make these flights, and sometimes you get really long lineups to get on the flights and going
Mm-hmm.
through security, and that's not the funnest process for sure. But the thing that always oversees the acceptance phase, like you were saying, is like I'm like all I see is palm trees, clear blue water. I'm on the beach with me and my girlfriend having drinks
Uh-huh.
and having a great time. So that helps me stay
Sure.
acceptance phase easier because I'm so fixated on, oh, I know we're going to be there and having a great time. So that so when I told my parents about that being in that acceptance phase, they're like, "Well, Alex, like anytime I go through any sort of challenges, they're like, just go back to when you're traveling and you don't like being in the lineups, but it's temporary. That being
Sure.
in that frame of mind, it helps when you're going through challenges at work and your relationship and in other areas. It's just sometimes we have these epiphanies like that where
Mm-hmm.
we're in complete understanding of what's going on, and we're also still staying much more positive than we normally would because we know that the end is in sight, or we know we're going to get to that happy place.
Sure. Well, and there's always what's happening in the moment, right? That
Hmm.
people are pretty fascinating. So while you're standing in that very long security line, or customs line, if you're going from country to country, you can get present to the people that you're embedded with, right? And following your breath and being present to the moment and present to the people that are around you. And you could always ask yourself, I wonder what that person's story is,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So, yeah, you could think about where you're going, and you could be present to where you are. And if you're at least in acceptance, that gives you the space to be present to those things.
No, for sure. And I got one last question for you, Daniel,
Sure.
before we go head off today.
Sure.
I was looking at your site. Have you done a lot of live events as part of your your career with your speaking and your life coaching, like your students, or has it been mainly more online and virtual and over phone calls?
Well, if you went to the wayoftheheart.com site, there's a calendar of our live events. We're usually booked out about a year and a half. I think
Wow.
we I think we're optimistically putting things up for 2021. I think we've let go of 2020, though the calendar might still be up there, and we're optimistic that we'll be able to show up live in a Technicolor in 2021. So there's a full schedule of the in-person weekend events and that kind of thing, and we do online things. Now we're doing Zoom, and we actually do some things that are telebridge format, over the phone. And the Zoom would be phone and Zoom, but I'm also working and collaborating with a company in Portland. So working with the life mission work, all 4 levels of the life mission work. So there's corporate and entrepreneurial training. And then for the Caravan of Remembering, you could go to caravanconversations.community to line up with, if you were interested in working the process with a group of other people. You can use the Caravan of Remembering to work on it by yourself, or you could connect. You could go to the caravanofremembering.com website, and that you could connect to a group there, or you could also go to caravanconversations.community to line up with people to work with. We have some people that are calling in from around the world and working together as a group, and in the U.S. and Canada, we have groups, and so you could work that way. But for the Caravan of Remembering life mission process, there are virtual process we're doing through the Way of the Heart, which was mostly the general population work, and then there's what we're coming on board with now is what I call the Hugh Person Project, and that's the same life mission work addressed to corporate and entrepreneurial ventures and projects.
Wow, that sounds incredible. And yeah, well, really appreciate your time today, Daniel. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. And then just before you go as well, where are you most active? If you are active on social media and your website, where can our listeners find you and your books?
Well, the Caravan of Remembering is available in all ebook formats. So you can order hard copy through Amazon, but it's available in Kobo or Apple iTunes or Cafe or Kindle.
Kindle, yeah.
Kindle. I just trying to remember what that was. So all the ebook versions, and you can get it on Amazon, the hard copy on Amazon, and there's a YouTube channel for the Caravan of Remembering, and you could go to thewayoftheheart.com, and you could go to the Caravan of Remembering.com, and the HughPersonProject.com will be upcoming, and caravanconversations.community to work in community. And I think there's a Facebook channel and a YouTube channel for Caravan, and otherwise you go to the Caravan, thewayoftheheart.com.
Awesome. Thanks for your time again, Daniel. Really appreciate all your wisdom and your advice, and I know our listeners are going to take it to heart and use that to better themselves and others around them.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. You take care. Have an awesome rest of your weekend. All right.
You too. Bye.
Bye. I hope you all enjoyed this special guest series episode brought to you by RadioGuestList.com. Again, this is your host, Alex Muir. And if you'd like to learn more about kind of what I do and this podcast, MindCep Podcast, you can check me out on my social media. I always post all my links of my social media in every episode that I post. And I share all my posts, my podcast posts on my LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So you'll be able to check out the podcast links on there. So if you want to connect with me, get to know me, I will be answering messages on there. If you have any questions. And again, if you want to hear more episodes like these, or if you have any feedback, please let me know on social media. You can send me a message, or you can, feel free to follow my podcast, and be sure to, keep checking in and see what I'm up to. I really appreciate everyone that listens to my podcast, and hope you guys all enjoy it, and see y'all next time. Take care.